Hey guys, welcome to your second project. So in this project, we're going to build a theme called Mizuxe, and it's basically for a book. And I format it as kind of like a self-help book that's written by a couple authors. It is a one-page theme like LoopLap, and you can see at the top we have a pretty customized nav bar. It's much thicker, fonts are much bigger. We have a little logo here. Right here we have a showcase area with an overlay, a blue overlay this time, or bluish, greenish, tealish, whatever you want to call this color. And then we have an image here and some text. We have a little newsletter section with a little form, inline form. We have some boxes. We have this area. So this is like the about, and it has an accordion. So we can open and close these. And then we have this meet the authors where we have some images over cards. We're going to kind of bring them up above the card, and we can hover over these as well to change the color. And then here we have this contact form where we use input groups. So we're going to add these icons here, and then the logo, and then a simple footer. Okay, and it also is using the jQuery block that we use for smooth scrolling. And then as far as responsiveness goes, you can see that it looks pretty good. So if I open the menu, and everything is in line, or stacked, I should say, and looks good. And what's going to be really unique about this project is we're going to be using Sass, which is a CSS precompiler that allows us to do things like use variables in our CSS. We can nest styles, but most importantly, we can edit the Bootstrap, basically edit the core Bootstrap. And we're going to make it so that when we do BTN primary or BG primary, this is going to be the default color instead of that regular Bootstrap blue. So I'm going to show you how to grab the CSS files from the Bootstrap source code, and we're going to use something called Koala, which is a GUI program, a graphical interface, to compile our Sass. Okay, in the last version of this course we used npm with gulp, and it got really complicated, and I think it kind of messed a lot of people up, and I didn't want to do that this time. I wanted to do something more simple and not do as much JavaScript, because I realized there's a lot of people that are just coming from an HTML CSS background and they don't know about gulp and compiling through command lines and you know, using npm to install packages and things like that. So I want to keep this version of the course more simple. All right, so that's what we'll be building in this section, guys. Hopefully you enjoy it, and let's get started. All right, so we're going to get started on the Mizuxe project, but the first thing I want you to do is I want you to install something called Koala, which is a Sass compiler, a less and Sass compiler. And Sass is a CSS preprocessor that allows you to use things like variables and so on, nesting. We're going to look at some of those features, but most importantly, I'm going to show you how to use Bootstrap with Sass. So if you wanted to change, let's say, the primary color, you know, where you have button primary and BG primary, you can change that from within the Sass variables file that comes with the Bootstrap source code. Now, there's a lot of different ways to compile Sass. In the old course, we used gulp, but it was a lot of work. We had to create a big JavaScript gulp file, and I realized that a lot of people that are learning Bootstrap, they don't really know a lot of JavaScript. They're basically just getting into like HTML, CSS, and it confused a lot of people. Most of the Q&A stuff had to do with gulp and npm, and it just got really complicated. So I figured in the revision of the course, we'd do something simple and just use a basic GUI program, which is very efficient. And it is cross-platform, so whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you should be able to run it. If you want to do something more complicated and use gulp, or use npm, use webpack, whatever it is that you want to compile your Sass, you can do that, node Sass. But I want to keep this simple for people that aren't really at that point yet. Okay, so just download this, install it. I already have it installed, so once you do that and open it up, it should look something like this. Very simple interface. Basically, we just want to create our project folder and then add it to it. And we're just going to set a couple options. So let's create a new folder for our project, and we're going to call this Mizuxe. So let's say, if you're wondering where I got these weird names, it was from just a random name generator. So let's say Mizuxe. And I'm going to grab everything, I'm going to grab everything in the BS4 boiler and bring that over to our new folder. Now, in addition to this, though, we need a place for our Sass files. Now, when we write our CSS, it's going to be in files with a .scss extension. That's the Sass extension, and that's how it knows to compile that stuff. And then what it does is it spits out a regular CSS file from the Sass files. And that's what Koala is going to do for us. So let's create a folder called SCSS. Okay, and we're actually going to have our own custom style.scss. So let's create that. So it'll be style.scss. All right, and then what we want to do is go to get bootstrap.com, and if we go to download, and we want the source files. So the source files will actually include all the Sass files as well. So we're going to grab that, and let's open that when done. And you'll see a folder called SCSS. So we want to click on that. And basically what Bootstrap does in most frameworks that use preprocessor, they have all of these different files. So for each thing, like modals, the nav bar, pagination, they all have their own SCSS files with their own styling. And you see how they have underscores? That's basically an include file. So these won't get compiled to a regular CSS. Basically what's going to happen is they're all going to be combined into this one bootstrap.scss file, and that's the one that we want to compile. Now, when we want to edit, like let's say button colors or something like that, then we want to edit this variables file. That's really the only file that we're going to need to edit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this and put it into the SCSS folder. Okay, so we want the mixins. The mixins is basically like functions in Sass, but we want to grab all of this and just bring it over. All right, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and go to Koala, and we're going to just click this plus sign to add our project. And mine is on my desktop, so let's say desktop Mizuxe, and I'm going to click OK. And then we need to decide what we want to compile and where it should go, where the regular CSS file should be spit out. By default, it'll be in the SCSS folder. I don't want that. I want it to go into the CSS folder. So let's take a look. We have the Bootstrap Grid CSS, Bootstrap Reboot. I don't want these to compile. I just want the Bootstrap and our custom styles SCSS. So what I'm going to do is just go to this, and I'm going to uncheck auto compile. Same with the reboot. I'm going to uncheck that. And let's uncheck source maps as well. I don't want to do any source maps. And then for Bootstrap SCSS, I'm going to keep auto compile. I'll get rid of the source map, and if we right click, you'll see this set output path. So I'm going to click that, and I want to set the output to go to the regular CSS folder. Now it needs a file as well, so what we'll do is add in here bootstrap.css. That's what I want it to get compiled as. So if I click save, now you'll see this line right here shows where that's going to get compiled and spit out. Now for the style.css, I want it to auto-compile, meaning I don't have to manually click compile. I don't want the source map, and I'm going to set the output path to the CSS folder to this style.css and save. It already exists. Yes, we want to replace it. Okay, and then let's see this here, combine import. Let's deminify it. We'll just uncheck that. All right, so basically these two Sass files will get compiled to Bootstrap CSS and Style CSS. Now you don't see Bootstrap CSS here because it hasn't actually compiled yet. We can go ahead and manually compile this now. So if we go to Bootstrap CSS and I click compile, it'll do its thing. And there it is. So that's the compiled version. If I go on style.css and compile, there's nothing in it, but it'll still run. and whatever was, if we put something in here, any kind of Sass, it would compile to regular CSS. Okay, and that's really all we have to do to set up. As long as we have Koala running, this stuff will auto compile. So now let's open up Mizuxe with VS Code. And what I'm going to do here, you can see we have our Sass folder, and it has all the Bootstrap stuff. You could put this in a subfolder if you want, but I'm just going to leave it like this. And the only files we really need to pay attention to is the rstyle.scss. That's our custom file. And it looks like it already compiled it here, so we can actually delete this, as well as this Bootstrap CSS. All right, so we have our custom one, and then if we look at underscore variables, this is where we can change all the different colors and spacing. So if we wanted like MB2 to be 0.35 or something like that, we can change that. So we can create a completely customized Bootstrap file, and it'll get compiled to that Bootstrap CSS. All right, so let's go to our index.html. And instead of using a CDN, which is this link here, we don't want to use the CDN because that's just an already compiled version of Bootstrap. We want to include this right here, this custom Bootstrap CSS file. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this to CSS/Bootstrap CSS and save. All right, so now just to test it out, let's do... let's see, let's put a link formatted as a button, and we'll say BTN warning. And we'll just say test. I'm going to delete this after, but let's just make sure everything's working, everything compiles. So I'm going to run this with live server. And you'll see that we have a yellow warning button, which is just the default Bootstrap coloring. Now, if I go back to VS Code and we go to our SCSS and we go to variables, and let's go up to colors, and you see that yellow has a certain hexadecimal color. And if we go down to these primary, secondary, success, warning is set to yellow. So I could change the version of yellow if I want, or I could change everything that's warning to be orange. So if I change this to orange and I save this, it's going to compile automatically. It should. And if we go back to our browser, now the warning button is going to be orange, and anything to do with warning is going to be orange. So this is how you can really customize your Bootstrap. Okay, so I'm just going to go back and just undo that change that I just did in the variables and save. So it should recompile. And again, what it's doing is compiling into this Bootstrap CSS, which we're including in our index file right here. All right, so now that everything is set up, in the next video, we'll go ahead and we'll get started on actually building our theme. Let me just get rid of this right here. And now we should be ready. All right, so I will see you in the next video. All right, so now that we have our project boilerplate set up with Sass, okay, you should have Koala open so that Sass compiles automatically. We're going to start on our custom navbar. Okay, this navbar is going to be a little different. It's going to be much thicker. We're also going to implement a custom logo. So let's get the images for this project. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to our Mizuxe theme and the IMG folder, and then go to my project images, which it's available in the I think it's section 6. It's the Bootstrap boiler video. And then in Mizuxe, you'll see we have a bunch of different images. We have this custom logo that I just created with Photoshop, just an M inside of a circle. So we're just going to grab all of these and put those inside of our image folder. Okay, and then we'll go back to VS Code, and we want to start on our navbar. So we're going to go right here. I'm just going to replace this start here with a nav tag, and I'm going to give this all of our basic classes. So navbar. We also want to do navbar expand, And I'm going to do MD for this. Instead of SM, I'm going to have it happen at the responsiveness happen at medium screens. And then I'm going to say navbar dash light because it will be a light navbar. And let's also make it, actually I should be putting dots here. Let's also make it fixed top. And like I said, I want it to be a little thicker, so I'm going to give it a PY padding of 4, so padding on the top and bottom. And then inside the nav, let's put a container. And then we're going to put our branding, so a tag with the class of navbar dash brand. And it's just going to go to index HTML. Actually, we can have it go to, let's have it go to hash home. And for the branding, we're actually going to put our logo in here. So we want an image tag, and we're going to give this, let's see, we'll just do image tab. We'll do a source, which is in the image folder, and it's called mlogo.png. All right, and I'm going to set a fixed width of 50 and also a height of 50. And then right under that, I'm going to put an H3 with the class of D inline. I want this to display inline against the image, and I want it to align to the middle. And then in here, I'm just going to say Mizuxe, which is the name of the theme. Okay, now under the branding, under the A tag, we'll put our button, and this will be the navbar toggler. And then we want to add data toggle of collapse. And I know that some of this is repetitive, but it's going to get it in your brain so that you don't have to keep looking at this stuff to, when you're building your own projects. So data target, let's do, we'll just say navbar collapse. And inside the button, we want our span. And it's going to be navbar dash toggler. Let's not make the same mistake that we made in the last project and forget the R. It's going to be navbar toggler icon, not icons, icon. And then under the button is where we're going to have our div with the ID of navbar collapse. Okay, and this is also going to have a class of collapse and also navbar collapse. Okay, so inside here we'll have our UL, which will have a class of navbar nav, and it'll also have a class of ML auto to align everything. And then we just have our items. So let's do li.nav item. And every link needs to have a class of nav link. And this is going to go to home. For the text, we'll say home. And then I'll just copy this li. So we're going to do, that's 1, we'll do 2, 3, and 4. So the second one is going to go to about. So we'll change that and this. This one is going to go to authors. And for the text, we're going to say meet the authors. And then this last one is going to go to the contact. And for this, we'll just say contact. Okay, so that should do it. Let's save and let's take a look. So it should look like this by default. Now, we're going to add some stuff to this. I want to have a nice box shadow with the main color. The main color of this, the primary color I should say, is going to be this teal or bluish green, whatever you want to call this color here of the logo. So let's go back to our VS Code, and we're going to go into our Sass, our custom Sass file, which is style.scss. That's where you want to write your CSS. Now, with with Sass, we can use variables. So I'm going to set a primary variable. Okay, variables are done with a money sign, and I'm going to set it to the actual, to that bluish, that tealish color. That's going to be the main color. So we're going to say 329 2A6. Okay, that's going to be our primary color. And while I'm at it, I'm going to put the primary overlay as a variable as well, because we are going to be using an overlay in this theme too, which is going to be an RGBA value. And it's going to be 50 for red, 146 for green, 166 for blue. So basically the same color, just in RGBA, so that we can have an opacity or an alpha value of 0.8. Okay, and those are really the only two variables that we're going to need. Now the body, I want to push the body down because it's a really thick nav bar and I don't want content to go underneath it. So we're going to say margin top 105 pixels. And if you want to put other stuff in variables, feel free to do so. It's up to you how you want to structure it. For the nav bar itself, so class nav bar, I want a box shadow. And I'm going to set it to 2 pixels. So this is horizontal offset, vertical, blur. I'll do a 5 pixel, and then the color is going to be our primary variable. I'm going to set the opacity to 0.9, and let's set the background of the nav bar to white. Now with Sass, I want to do the nav bar item. So normally we would do like nav bar, and then we would do nav dash item like that. But with Sass, we can actually nest styles. So I can just take just the nav item here, and I can put it inside here like that. Okay, you can't, I mean, this isn't something that you can do with CSS. And this is only going to target nav items that are within this nav bar. It's not like any nav item anywhere on the page this is going to affect. It has to be within the nested, within the parent. So let's set a font size. And I'm actually going to use a rem unit here. So I'm going to say 1.4 rem. And we kind of went over rem units. It's basically a multiplier of the HTML font size, which is by default 16 pixels. And then let's set a padding right, and we'll also do 1.4 rem. So let's save that and see what it looks like. And there we go. So now we have this big fat nav bar. It looks much different than your standard Bootstrap nav bar. We have a logo, we have some larger fonts, and we have this nice box shadow underneath. All right, so now that we've done that, in the next video, we're going to start to work on the showcase area, and we're also going to change the primary color of all of the primary stuff within Bootstrap, so that'll get compiled into our custom Bootstrap CSS. All right, so I'll see you in the next video. All right, guys, so in this video, we're going to work on the big showcase area, which has the big image. And let me just pull that up, actually. We'll pull up the final. I think it's helpful to look at the final project as well. So just give me 1 second here. Let's see, Mizuxe. All right, so this is what the final project looks like. So we're going to be working on this main showcase area. So it has this text over here. It has the background with the overlay. It has this poster mock-up that I created in Photoshop. So that's what we'll be doing. And I'm just going to bring that out. Okay, so let's go back to VS Code. Let's go to our index.html. We're going to add the markup first. So we'll go under the nav. And let's add in our showcase. So this is going to be a section with the ID of showcase. And we're also going to give it a class of py5. We want padding on the top and bottom. I really love these margin and padding classes in Bootstrap. It saves a lot of time, or a lot of custom CSS where you have to add your own margins and paddings. Now this is going to have an overlay, just like in the last theme. So we're going to call this primary, a class with primary overlay. And we also want to make the text white. So I'm going to give it a class of text white. And in here, we want our container because we want everything to be contained. And then let's put a row. And we're going to have two 6-column divs starting from the large screen. So it'll be call LG6, not MG, LG6. And let's do ×2 tab. Okay, now in this first one, we're going to have our text. I actually want everything centered, so I'm also going to add text center here. And then let's do an H1, and let's give it a display-2 class. It's going to be a pretty big font. And then I want to do a margin top 5, and let's also do a padding top 5 to kind of move it down. And then the text inside here is just going to say, do what you dream of, ... And then under the H1, we'll put a paragraph with the class of lead to make it a little more prominent. Let's do lorem 10 tab. And underneath the paragraph, we're going to have our button, which is actually a link formatted as a button. Let's do btn dash outline dash secondary. And let's also make it a large button, so btn LG. And let's also make the text white. Okay, and this is not actually going to go anywhere. And then inside the link, or inside the button, the text it's going to be read more, but I also want to put an icon next to it, an arrow right icon from Font Awesome. So I'm going to put an I tag with the class of FAS and also the class of FA-arrow-right, like that. All right, and then on the other side, on this other 6-column div, let's just put the image. So I'm going to say image. I'm going to give it a class of img fluid. And I only want this to show on large screens. So just like we did in the last video where we actually did it with the text, we're going to do that here as well. So we'll say display none at first, but then when it gets to the large screen, we want it to display as block. So we'll say d-lg-block, like that. And then the source is going to be in the image folder, and it's going to be book.png. Okay, so let's save that and let's see what it looks like. So right now, it's just, I mean, you can't even see the text because it's white. What we want is that background image, which we have to do through the CSS. And we also want to have that primary overlay. So let's go to our CSS. And let's see, we're going to go right below the nav bar. Make sure you're not within it. Make sure you're outside of it. And we want the ID of showcase. We're going to set it to position relative and set the background URL. So say background URL. And that's going to be in the image folder. Actually, we have to go outside of the CSS. So slash image slash, and then we want the mountains.jpg. And then let's set a min height for the showcase of 600 pixels. Now for the overlay, since the overlay is inside of showcase, we can use Sass to just nest it in here. So we can just do dot primary overlay. We'll set our background. Now the background, we actually have that set in a variable up here, so we can just simply put that in here. All right, now just like we did with the overlay in the other one, we want to set it to position absolute. Okay, this is what you do when you want your a child element to basically cover the entire parent. Okay, and the primary overlay is the child of showcase. So we want the background, the position absolute, start from top 0 and left 0. And we want the width to cover everything, so 100%, and also the height, 100%. All right, so let's go ahead and save, and let's take a look. And there we go. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now I'm not going to change the primary color variable within the variables, the custom Bootstrap yet, because we haven't used primary. I want to just show you how it changes. So we'll do that in the next video. And in the next video, we're going to add the little newsletter section here. and also the boxes. Okay, so we'll do that next. So we have our showcase area done. Now what we want to do is add our newsletter area with the inputs and then the boxes. And just to show you what I mean, if I pull the finished version over, we want this here, and then we want these boxes. In addition to that, we want to make it so that the primary button, the primary background, is this color here instead of the default Bootstrap. But before we do that, let's test the responsiveness, because I don't think we did that in the last video. So if we make this small, okay, so remember we have it on medium screens, expand MD. So that's when it's going to turn responsive as far as the menu goes. And this looks good. So the image disappears once we get down to large, and we go smaller. Now when we get here, you'll see it kind of breaks out of the background image. And that's fine for now, because what we're going to do later on, we're going to add some media queries to basically shrink this text down on smaller screens. In fact, we could do that now. We could get that over with now. It's pretty simple. So let's go to our CSS, and we're going to go to the bottom here. I'm going to make sure I like to put the media queries at the bottom, so make sure they stay down here. And what we want to do here is say on a max width screen of 768. Okay, so this means when the screen size or the device is less than 768 pixels, then this CSS will kick in. And what I'm going to do is set the showcase to have a min height of 500 pixels, and I also want to set the H1 in the showcase. Since we're using, this is a SCSS, a Sass file, I can simply put H1 in here, and it will only target the H1 in the showcase. And then we're going to say font size, and let's use a 4 rem unit. And let's save that. Well, it moves up anyways. And the reason it moves up is because I'm using the prettier extension, so it kind of just changes a couple little things. But now, whoops. Now you can see that it fits. And you can tweak it more if you want. If you want to make this shorter or the text smaller, you can do that within the media queries. All right, there's no rule saying you have to do exactly what I do. If you guys want to tweak these projects a little bit, please do. All right, so let's go back to our HTML, and we're going to go under the showcase area, and this is where the newsletter is going to go. So this is going to be a section. I'm going to give it an ID of newsletter. I'm going to give it a class of bg-dark and also text white. Okay, so obviously we want a dark background with white text. And I'm going to add some padding on the top and bottom, so py5. And here we want a container to contain the content within this newsletter area. We want a row. And then what we're going to do here is have 3 4-column rows. And we want them to stack on small screens. So we're going to use the medium size here. We're going to say call -md-4. Actually, it should be class call md4, and let's do times 3. So in this first one, we want to put an input, and we're going to give it a class of form control, of course. And let's actually make this a large one, so we'll say form control LG, and then let's add a placeholder. And we'll say enter name. Okay, and then what I'll do is copy this input. We'll paste that in here. So this is going to be for the email. So say enter email, and we can change it to an email field if we want. And then in this one, this last one, this is going to be a button. So I'm going to say button. We're going to give it a class of btn. It's going to be a btn primary button. We're also going to make it a large button, so we want to do btn-lg. We also want it to stretch all the way across, so btn-block. And inside here, we're going to put an icon. So we're going to do FAS.FA-envelope-open-O. Okay, that's the font awesome icon that I want to use. And then we're just going to say subscribe. And that should do it. So let's save that and see what it looks like. Oops, did not want to do that. Okay, so that's what it should look like. Now, this, obviously we don't want this color. Now, if we weren't using Sass, we would have to just kind of overwrite the button primary class. But then for like the BG primary class, we'd also have to overwrite that. With Sass, we can make a custom Bootstrap file or compile a custom file that will make this any color we want. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to VS Code, and we're going to go down to variables, _variables SCSS. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an extra color. So let's see. Or we could change one of these. You know what we'll do? We'll just change the blue because it is kind of a blue, I guess. So we'll just change this to the main color, which is going to be 329 2A6. And we could have just as easy created another variable here called something else and set it to this, and then gone down to where it says primary and put that variable here. But instead, we're just going to change the blue value. All right, and if I go ahead and save this, it should compile. I have Koala open, and it's set to auto compile. So let's go back, and now the button is that color. And it's not just BTN primary that's going to change, it's anything to do with primary. Okay, so alerts or backgrounds, text, anything, it's going to use this color now. Now, one more thing I want to do here is if we go and we make this really small, you can see that there's no spacing in between these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a custom class to the inputs here. So I'm going to say right here in class, I'm going to add MB-RESP. So what it stands for is margin bottom responsive. So on responsive or mobile views, I want this to have a margin bottom. This is not a Bootstrap class. We're going to add the CSS for this. So we're going to add it to this one as well. So we'll say MB-RESP. And I'm going to save this, and then we only need this inside of our media query because we only want it on small screens. So let's go down here and let's just add outside of the showcase. We don't want to be inside the showcase, but we want to be inside the media query and want to say MB.RESP. Oops. And let's do margin bottom. And let's do 1 rem. So it'll be 16 pixels. And now you can see that it's separate. Now, I don't know why they don't have like the margin and padding spacing classes that are responsive. So I would think that you could do like my-sm or something like that. But as far as I know, that doesn't exist. It didn't exist in 4.0 or whatever. I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist in 4.1.1. So that's why I added our own class. So let's move on to the next section. So we can close up variables. Let's go to our index.html and go underneath the newsletter. And this is where we're going to put our boxes. So let's say comment boxes. I like to just comment everything nicely so we know, and give everything a section tag with an ID so we know where we're at. So we'll give this an ID of boxes, and we want the padding, so we'll do py-5. And then we're going to have a container because we want everything to be put in the middle, at least the boxes themselves. And then we're going to use the grid for this. So we want a row, and we're going to do basically 4 3-column divs for anything that's medium and above. So let's do call dash md dash 3. Okay, so did I say 3 4? If I said 3 4-column divs, I meant 4 3-column divs. So we can say this times 4. And in this first one here, we're going to use cards. So let's give it a class of card. Let's also make everything to the center. So we'll do text center. I want to do a border dash primary class here. And I'm also going to use the MB resp that we did, that custom class for small screens, so that they're not right on top of each other. So let's go ahead and add that. And inside the card, we want a card body class, which will give it all the padding and stuff like that. Inside the card body, we'll do an H3. And I want the color to be that bluish, tealish, greenish, whatever color, whatever you want to call that color. I'm not very good at identifying colors, but it's going to be text primary, and we'll say be better. Okay, so this is basically like a self-help type book. So let's put a paragraph with the class of text muted, which will make it a little lighter. And let's do lorem 10 tab, so we'll put 10 words in. And then each call MD3 is going to be similar. They're going to all have these cards. So I'm going to copy the whole card div and go to the next one, paste that in. So this one here, we're going to change it to be smarter. And then I want them to alternate from being a light box with a primary border to a background, primary background. So we're going to change this to BG-primary like that. And then we want the text to be white, so we're going to say text white. And then that can stay the same. The text can stay the same. The next one I want to be the light color, so I'm going to copy this card, first one, go down to here, paste that in, and we'll change this to, let's say, be faster. Everything else, I believe, can stay the same. Yeah, because we want the border primary and so on. The last one, I want to have the background primary. So I'm going to copy this card, which is the second one, and put that in here. And let's change this to be stronger. Okay. And this one, we don't need the MB RESP because it's the last one. So let's save this and see what it looks like. Okay, so there we go. For the text, what did I do? I did text muted. So it's gray because this still has the text muted. We need to make this text white. So let's go ahead and change the ones that have the BG primary. You'll see right here we still have text white for the card, but not for this part here. We have text muted. So what we can do is just completely get rid of this class. And then this text white will take effect for everything. Same thing with this one that has BG primary. We'll get rid of the text muted. And that should do it. Okay, the heading is not correct. So let's see, for the H3, we still have text primary, so we want to change that, or actually just get rid of that. Okay, so wherever we have BG primary, which is the second and fourth, we want to get rid of the text primary here because it's the same color as the background, so we're not even seeing it. Okay, so now it's all white. And if we test the mobile version of this, there we go. So it looks pretty good. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. In the next one, we're going to start to add the About section with the little accordion. So if we look at the final product here, we want to do this whole section. We want this little accordion menu thing here as well. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.